Hey everyone, it is Savanna with Signature Ways, and I am so excited for our guest today. And I know I say that all the time, yet I had the privilege to get to really know him in this past month in June um, at Quantum Leap and got to hear the amazing things he has done, let alone just leading into AI. So he has been able to take a PC program that was in the single digits and grow it into a well-oiled machine, helping agents produce, along with stepping into a new exciting role and also an AI wizard. So without further ado, I would like to bring Trevor to the stage. Hello, friend.
Hello, friend. I feel like wizard. I don't have any magic wand or anything though. So,
Okay,
but
well, okay.
nonetheless, I like the title. I'll get that on a plaque somewhere.
Perfect. I love it. So tell me, I always start with this question. How did you end up getting into the real estate industry?
Yeah. So, a little bit of context. I'm 28 right now. I started my first business when I was 19. So from 19 to I've been 24, maybe 25, somewhere in that time frame. Like many entrepreneurs, I went through many businesses. I had to learn a lot of failures. We talk about failing forward a lot. I have certainly done my fair share of that, I would say. I'm happy to get into any of those details. But I went through a few different businesses, and then in the middle of the pandemic, I actually was recruited to go work at like a corporate capacity in research and development. And while I was there, I actually bought my first property. And I had a friend of mine who was living with me. And so I was basically the concept of house hacking. So I had him living in one of the rooms and he would pay me this monthly rent. And while that was going on, I was like, I kind of like this whole idea of making money off of somebody living with me. So I started getting interested in real estate from an investment capacity. So I started taking my classes in the evening while I was working at this other job. And ultimately, once I got to a place where I actually was taking the test and becoming licensed, I'm just not built for the corporate space. And I think coupled with the fact that it was the pandemic, I was actually onboarded like remotely. So I had to go into an office space and actually into a lab, and I was being trained. Actually, like I literally would have my computer facing whatever equipment I was using that day, and my team would train through this webcam remote. And so it was just kind of a weird environment, which was, I'm sure everybody's pandemic experience. And so ultimately, I decided that I wanted to lean more into the real estate side of things because it was entrepreneurial and that was what I'm really passionate about. So I made the full-time switch in kind of like call it Q1, Q2 of January 2022. And then ultimately, that's what got me into real estate. I started on a team as my title was buyer's agent, but they kind of had some flexibility to also list property as well. So I started from there, and that was how I got into it.
Awesome. And tell me, because I think people will be interested to hear about this, kind of your journey as a PC coach.
Yeah. So the transition there happened. I was on a team here. I'm in the Dayton area for location wise. I say Cincinnati just because that's what people are most familiar with, but technically our office is in Dayton. So I was on a team here in our Dayton office, and then I actually my stepbrother is also in KW. He's also a real estate agent as well, but he is specifically in Cincinnati, and he is with the Shrewsbury Group down there in Cincinnati. And so they are in our region, they're the top producing group in our area. So I got called to go down there and work with my brother for a little bit of time and just kind of see their well-oiled machine that they have operating. And then whenever back here at the Dayton office, the PC program kind of opened up, a spot was made available. They asked me to come back up here and basically kind of deploy a lot of the systems and tools that they were using down there in Cincinnati and kind of bring them up here to the Dayton area. So I kind of got started with that. That's about a little over a year and a half ago that I took over in that capacity. And like you mentioned in the intro, through no fault of anybody specifically, but just the program that I was inheriting was the analogy that I felt like was applicable was I was going in and there was a lot of sticks, and it was basically like, hey, whatever you want to build with the sticks, you're allowed to do, because there's not a whole lot of infrastructure laid. So my intention from the beginning was I really wanted to build out the machinery such that, whenever eventually I graduated from the role, that someone would come into an already moving train and not have to feel like they had to pick something up from scratch. So a lot of that was just the ability to get visibility with the agents, frankly. We didn't have a strong onboarding sequence for the agents where, if we had somebody new that joined and we got put into the PC program, that from both mutually, like me as the coach and then them as the agent, there wasn't really anything that existed that I could say, hey, I'd love to get you spun up on these core competencies and then be able to meet with you to review how you're doing in that aspect and be able to track their progression through that. So that was what we made a big investment in about a year ago. And then that was really what took us from, at that point, I was probably around a dozen agents in the PC program. And then that's what really allowed us to start to scale. So we topped out. I'm currently at 42 agents that are on the roster right now. And our office has about 175 agents in it. So it's about a quarter of the agents that are in our office are represented in the PC program. And then, like you mentioned in the intro as well, that's kind of what got me into this next opportunity that I'm taking on, which is going to be director of operations for another group that's in our area. And there was just a lot of overlap between what they were trying to do and what the PC program needed, when I got started with that. So I'm kind of really going to be taking a lot of the same principles and applying it into that capacity as well.
And you for sure are, because I think a lot of it with that is like this AI overlap. And obviously that's our topic today. So tell me though, before we kind of fully jump into the AI, where do you kind of see AI show up on the day-to-day scale for agents currently?
Yeah, I think, and I know we just talked about this, offline in advance, but I think the biggest thing, I know that we're going to talk about lead gen, and that's always going to be a top priority. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just maintaining a good books, like your accounting, actually being a true business owner. I think that's the biggest opportunity for agents. I think because from a KPA perspective, I know that agents are not the most apt to, be the ones who handle their administration, which is why eventually, the first hire is typically bring in an admin. But I think that if you're not in the space yet where bringing in an admin, makes sense, I think that the AI tools are a phenomenal place to be able to start to build out a really strong back end infrastructure as far as, like keeping accounting, bookkeeping, your, standard operating procedures. I think all those are really great ways that you can deploy AI like right now and, get that done like fast and be able to, get into a really good spot. My pastor always says he's classically trained, like he went to school for accounting and he used to be an accountant before he became a pastor of our church. And he has said that, through his 40 some odd years of being in ministry and meeting with a lot of different people that are business owners, the common theme that he says that he sees of those that succeed and don't is those that keep good accounting versus those that don't.
And it's funny that you bring that up because, we just recently had a podcast with Jason Levi, and we were talking about how you can be in real estate or you can have a business in real estate. And we were really talking about, getting to understand your numbers, that kind of stuff. Yet from the accountant perspective, you're 100% right, because I see so many agents that they have all these closings and yet they're still living commission check to commission check. And it's quite fascinating. Like they don't actually know where all their money is going. So how can AI kind of help with that and help them structure? Because ironically enough, too, before this podcast, I went through and I was like, I just want to put our books in there. And it gave me a couple little tweaks. I was like, oh, good point. Good point.
Yeah, I think to your point, exactly. My first year in real estate specifically, this kind of gets back to, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. My first year in real estate, I'm probably like a lot of other agents where saving for taxes was not something that I prioritized well enough. And so the time came when, Uncle Sam came a knocking and said, "Where's my money?" And I said, "Your money's long been spent, brother." And so I definitely was hit with that my first year for sure. And so most specifically, I think a tool that's phenomenal is Sequence. Think about it like sequencing. What this allows people to do, and I'd be happy to like provide this, after the fact and kind of show what my map looks like. But as an example, let's say I have a commission check come in, it automatically sets up basically logic rules of what percentages of money goes where. So right off the rip, I can get deposited a commission check. It will disperse it according to the percentages that I pay out. So I can say, hey, I know, like for me personally, I wanted to be better about tithing in addition to saving for taxes. So I wanted to say, hey, 10% of my money right off the bat, I just want to go to this one account where there's nothing else that it does except for, pay for tithing, as an example. So you can set up all these really complex logic rules where you don't need to manually go in and say, hey, I'm going to remember to have the discipline to move my money to an account that I'm going to, exclusively use for taxes. It takes away all that guesswork. And so you can actually just, hey, check comes in, and then boom, I get an email summary of, based on my percentages, what money got moved where. And so, I have it structured as, hey, it goes into my LLC. I have a savings account for that. I have my operating account for it. There's also the idea of like, profit first, pay yourself first. So there's a certain percentage that just goes to, a savings account to build for that. And then I call it my middleman account, where after being, dispersed across my business, then on a personal level is when it gets distributed across a lot of other, priorities, essentially, tithing being one of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's definitely an important factor. And I think where I see them get in trouble too, is even if they're decent with their money, where I see things go wrong is when either like a medical emergency happens or all of a sudden there's no upcoming closings. And they went from this consistency to having no consistency and not having something to fall back on either.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think that definitely comes from like the business perspective, but I think it's also smart too. I feel like you could probably use AI to look at your monthly expenses and kind of calculate what you need if you didn't have closings for 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great tool that helps in that capacity, CFO Sylvia, something that I use every day. I was actually just on it right before you and I got on our call. It's another layer to, like, if you think about, for example, like I could go into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever my tool of choice is, and I could give it basically, hey, here's about how much money I have in, reserves or whatever the case might be. And it could be rough numbers, but it's ultimately not tied to any of my accounts. CFO Sylvia, you use Plaid as an integration, which just has read-only data into your, bank account information. Mm-hmm. And so I have it all wired up so that way it actually has the real-time visibility into all my assets, liabilities, things that are going on in that capacity. And then it acts as like a true CFO. So you can ask it CFO level questions around, just as an example, with my new role, my capacity, I'm kind of like planning out, I'm probably going to be moving to like better accommodate, where I'm going to be located. And so I was mapping out with CFO Sylvia, hey, if I'm planning to, make a physical move, what might that look like? What type of time frame, what type of reserve should I probably save up, based on, my overall, other goals that are, like I'm paying down student loans or other things like that. So, and it has visibility into like, not just generic terms. It has the real live visibility into all of my numbers, my data.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely feel like agents need to do these things because it's hard, right? Like everyone gets in real estate. Real estate is fun. You never know what the day is going to bring. Mm-hmm. Today I had all these, set tasks I was going to do for the business, and other things came up when I was driving. Emails came in and I sat down and saw them and I went, okay, we're taking a turn today. And yet at the end of the day, I make sure on my calendar I have time to review these books. And what a great tool to have to cut down on the time by using these AI tools.
Yeah, totally. And I think to that point, a great habit that, we all aspire to is like, hey, I want to be able to review my money daily. So, CFO Sylvia, as an example, I get an email message at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And it basically says, hey, as we're starting the day here, here's just your overall net worth snapshot, and just here's how things changed overnight, because obviously sometimes you get deposits overnight and things. So here's your snapshot of your net worth. Here's how things changed. And then I'm flagging anything that, like you might have such and such recurring subscription coming up here in the next couple of days to be aware of. And then at the end of the day, you get something similar. They call it a radar. But the radar is basically it's a more in-depth look into, hey, if I'm trying to be proactive and I were in your shoes, here's some things that you might want to consider, moving money here based on like kind of what you're talking about. Like if I didn't have any closings lined up and I was, getting slim on my reserves, hey, you might want to start being strategic around the money that you have in these various accounts and how to deploy that.
Interesting.
And it's free to start. It's like a lot of these tools. There's a free version of this. I'm actually still on the free version. I'm actually, when we talk about any other AI tool, I'm like a power user and I'm probably like paying, a hefty amount for them. But CFO Sylvia, I've stayed on the free version and I've gotten the full utilization of it. I know there are paid versions of it now, but I'm not frankly familiar with what they are. And if it's drastically different, I get everything that I need out of just doing the free version.
Well, and if it's free, what an incredible tool. Like, why wouldn't you take advantage of it then?
For sure. Yeah. And I think my understanding is that it started as like a research project. You can see the team that's involved in it. They're very transparent about it because I know that was something I was hesitant about is, hey, if I'm letting, this entity have like read access to my bank account information, that's a little scary. But I felt very confident and assured after reading more about it. It's legitimate people who, they're invested in the space and they really wanted to see, hey, like how can we help get more people access to higher level, like conversations with people that, otherwise, like I didn't have an accountant, up to this point, but like I use this tool and, like I get a lot of information out of it.
And I think that's one thing too. Another thing I actually see agents do too is just hand off everything to an accountant, which great. It's great to have that leverage 110%. Yet if you don't understand your own books and your own business and how it's operating, that's the part that scares me. Like for me, I have someone else file our taxes. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to fully understand every bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I have to make sure I understand a majority of it. So that way, if something doesn't sound right, I can look into it further, because I have seen agents just blindly write checks before and missed a bunch of deductions they could have taken.
Yeah, I think it's the concept of like extreme ownership. Like, do I need to be the person who physically completes my tax form? Probably not. Like that's what that professional is there for.
Right.
But to the same token, you're ultimately still responsible for knowing, how much that check that you're sending to, the government is, or like, how much you should be setting aside for those considerations. It's still your responsibility as the business owner and as an individual to know those things. And I think the tools just help you get that visibility, because like I said, when I got started, I just frankly wasn't paying as much attention as I probably should have, even though I was on a team and a lot of expenses were being taken care of on my behalf. There were still things that I was doing outside of, call it the team spending account that I wasn't even tracking, that I'm sure I could have taken advantage of as far as like what you're saying, deductions. But frankly, I didn't track it anywhere. It was nowhere visible for me to actually take action on.
Which, like a little quick like plug, if you don't have Mile IQ on your phone as an agent, that is what you have to have, because that thing right there, I mean, when I got to write off last year I was shocked.
Oh yeah. I think it's up to 73 cents a mile right now. I think it's 2026.
See, and I should know that, and I totally don't at the moment, but it probably is.
But I mean, you think about that, that's a lot. You drive 25 miles, that's almost $20 back.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. Like yesterday with all the driving I did, I was so shocked to see the number that it produced. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And something that I think agents don't think about that they can write off. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, that's the stuff you want to talk to your accountant about.
For sure. But to that point, like you mentioned Mile IQ, which is great tool. A lot of people I know use QuickBooks or like have aspirations to take advantage of QuickBooks. They have the same thing inside of QuickBooks that you can do. And then it keeps it all under the same platform, because ultimately if you're going to be sharing that with your tax people,
Yeah.
then you don't have to export it from MileIQ, into another place. It's all under the QuickBooks umbrella already. It works the same way. It works the same way.
Simplify, simplify, simplify.
For sure.
So from like a small business perspective, so solo agent, small team, what are some smart ways that they could be using these tools that maybe they've lost oversight on?
Yeah, I think especially if in relation to the AI space, I think everybody should have a Claude account. That's the biggest one that I'm pushing right now. And especially if you're on a team, you should have a team Claude account that you're operating. But with that, I bring that up specifically because they just released recently. There's the concept of skills and plugins inside of Claude. Just to kind of give a high level overview, a skill is just the concept that if I had a standard operating procedure of how I do, call it my transaction to close as an example, that step-by-step function that is repeatable is a skill in the world of Claude. And I can invoke that skill through a command. I call it /, call it transaction to close. Anytime I call upon that command, then it will automatically know to start doing that set standard operating procedure that's embedded within the skill. Plugins are just multiple skills layered together. So you can have multiple of them that work, almost like an orchestra. Each one is their own instrument, and together they create a symphony, right? And so from a small business perspective, if you think about it, we all have a lot of overlapping problems. We all have invoicing, we all have accounting like we're talking about. We all have very similar problems. And so they actually built a small business plugin that details like basically the 40 most common things that we're dealing with as small business owners. And you don't have to go try to reinvent the wheel on building out this library of, called skills and things that I need to, build myself. You can actually just deploy these already existing things, and it's going to get you the majority of the way there. And then all you need to plug in is just things that are relevant to your specific business, like the name and, who's who as far as the org chart. But the small business plugin inside of Claude it's just, you can download it for free from the library of, publicly made tools. It's coming directly from Anthropic, the developers. So like it is like their promoted, tool, so to speak. But I think that that's a fantastic place to start. There's literally a onboard function. So like, hey, once I download the plugin, I can invoke the command, like small business onboard, and it will literally walk you through how to truly utilize, the capacity of all the skills, which kind of gets also into the idea of the connectors. It's gonna prompt you to want to set up these connectors. And the idea of a connector is just as an example, I'm sure we're probably all using Google Calendar or, Gmail. And so if you want to connect your Claude account to any of those external services that you're already using, there's a whole library of things that it can connect to natively. Then the skills and plugins related to that small business platform, it will already know, like as an example, hey, most people use QuickBooks. And so it's already going to be trained on how to effectively use that. One of those, as an example, is quarterly tax savings, like scheduled task. So once a quarter, without you actually needing to physically invoke anything, it will run a scheduled task once a quarter to do a basically, audit of your books and say, hey, based on, your activity inside the QuickBooks account over the past 3 months, here thereabouts is where you should be as far as, your tax savings and your, payment that you need to make. Right. And then you don't need to ever think about that again. Like you said, hey, I got sidetracked because I had XYZ showings or things pop up. Cool. It doesn't matter because if your computer's open, it's going to run that task automatically for you. And then you're already getting notified.
Yep. Claude is definitely super powerful. And, there's some things that it's doing for us on the back end, like pulling market reports for us too. And one thing I kind of want to get into real quick, and I know this was not part of your questions. I do this to everyone that comes on.
It's all good. It's okay.
Part of your questions. But, one thing that I'm seeing agents struggle with so much right now is like bulletproofing their transaction, right? So, and where I see things falling short is actually before the appointment and directly after the appointment with either a buyer or seller. So how could they actually use Claude to kind of set up a process, and what would you recommend is part of that process, let's just say for going on a listing appointment and after the listing?
So it's you're describing the initial consultation that I'm doing with a new buyer or a new seller. I'm meeting with them for the first time, essentially.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And then you're trying to describe basically call it like after appointment follow-up conversation with that individual.
Yep.
Is that fair to say? Okay.
Yep.
I think first and foremost, you have to be engaging with your AI tool of choice before you go on the appointment, because it needs the context that you're going to be going on the appointment in the first place, right? So like you described, if you're doing a market report or something that you're preparing for a client specifically, I actually just had my stepbrother that I mentioned. He had a luxury listing that needed a lot of very personalized considerations to it, but he ran a lot of the information that he had about it he uses Claude as well. And he was able to put together a very detailed report that I know that no other listing person was going to go in there with that level of sophistication and detail about how they were going to market this, multi-million-dollar property. And ultimately, like, it's what got him the listing, because it was like, hey, I've put in all this, due diligence and effort into this in advance. Ultimately, though, when you're talking about the follow-up after the appointment, I think it's just, following up with your system to say, hey, I've met with this person now. Here was either their objections, here were their thoughts, here are our next steps, and then ask the system, how can you best help me in taking these, next steps together? And what's nice about, again, going back to the idea of things being connected, if that's an email, if that's whatever the case might be, a deliverable, because it's connected, you actually don't even need to, go external to be able to create, your follow-up messaging, so to speak. It can do all that for you.
And Claude's pretty powerful. I've seen it being able to do those follow-ups. And I've seen agents actually use it at a high level, like your stepbrother, for example. This is the one objection, though, that I hear from agents. They go, okay, well, that's great, but if every agent starts doing it, then aren't we all going to sound the same?
Sure. And I totally get that. And there's a real component of that. But I would say, going back to what you mentioned at the beginning, there's people that are called dabbling in the profession of real estate. And then I think there's real estate professionals and being a true business owner. And what other profession or what other business do you interact with where, after doing an appointment, you don't get some type of email confirmation of, hey, how was your visit today? Or how was your appointment today? Or, something automated where it confirmed your appointment when you had that requested. In any other profession and in any other industry, I think it's status quo, or, at least the baseline that I'm expecting that I'm supposed to, if I set an appointment, on your online site or, with you over the phone, that I'm getting some layer of automated communications confirming my appointment. And then after I have my appointment with you, hey, thanking you for coming out, and, like, I stayed at the hotel and the hotel says, hey, thanks for, staying with us. Any other profession, I think it's normal that you would be getting those type of messaging. I don't understand why real estate, agents and professionals need to be that much different. I would argue that, especially with the nature of what we do, and it's the most important thing in somebody's life at the moment, it should be, honestly, like, above and beyond that should be the normal, I think.
It 100% should be. And I have seen Jeff Abel, there's confirmation of the appointment, and especially if it's going to be a Zoom appointment, they get a, calendar invite. And we have heard that that's how the appointment was won, because simply just the follow-up after setting the appointment. And yet, for some reason, people get into real estate more of a hobby than actually treating it like a true business. And then they wonder why, these other people, they're having success. Well, it's, these systems they're following. And the great thing is Claude can help build that out. So, setting up a checklist for your appointments, saying, hey, after you call them, send them a calendar invite or send them a pre-listing packet. Whatever you want your process to look like, talk to Claude, write it out, help you build the assets around it, and use it as, agents are really good as visionaries. And sometimes I feel like they get stuck in the do. Mm-hmm. And Claude, I think, can be kind of that backbone to that do.
Absolutely. And I want to totally affirm what you're saying about the calendar blocking. It's It's just the fact that we're professionals and we respect our calendar as much as we, our clients should respect, their own calendar in their own life. To the extent that our clients are, actively using something like Google Calendar to map out their whole day is, like that's their own prerogative. But, us as a professional, I think it just sets the expectation that, hey, I value my time enough that I'm going to block this out and I'm making it an act that it will be reserved on my calendar. No one else is going to get that block except for you. And then if that client doesn't, end up respecting that or they cancel or whatever the case might be is, that's on them. But hey, I'm showing that I'm professional enough to say, hey, I'm reserving this for you. I think I feel like that's like the baseline.
100%. And even look at like, doctor's appointments and stuff like that. They're all moving towards this. And there's always someone that's kind of confirming the appointment with you, even if it's an automated call system. So I think it's a really important point for agents to realize, like, that's, if you want to run it like a business, you gotta treat it like it.
Yeah, and I use everything through Calendly is how I do all my scheduling, and Calendly will by default, or it might be one of the settings you might have to toggle on, but there is an option where you can set up the SMS reminder to your person. So in advance of you meeting with them, on whatever cadence you so choose, 72 hours in advance, 24 hours in advance, whatever the case might be, it'll send basically just that automated, SMS confirmation message to them. And again, am I expecting that person to reply to it? No, because I don't do that, whenever the doctor's, the dentist confirmation message comes in. But to the same token, I want them to get it. So that way it's again affirming, hey, I'm a professional. You're getting the things that you would expect with any other profession.
Well, and I think people wonder too, one thing with that message too, if you have the ability to change it, is explaining to them what you're getting ready for the appointment too. So, hey, working on your comps or, putting together a marketing piece. So excited to be meeting with you. So they know that you're thinking of them leading up to that appointment. And it's just not another number either. Because I think in real estate, sometimes people can feel very like it's a transactional, not
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. Yeah, I totally agree.
So let's jump into AI with lead gen.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you take it away and let's see where this goes.
That sounds good. I might have an interesting take on this. May or may not be interesting for the sake of what we're discussing, but I think it's more in the B2B space right now than it is to directly contact homeowners specifically. And what I mean by that is I think that there's a lot of data and information that I can gather. I'll give you a very specific example because I was talking about the skills concept earlier. So I have a skill built out inside of my Claude that I can invoke and it will run. It will scan all of our local news publications for, hey, such and such employer is adding, 1,000 new jobs in their building in this specific city, or such and such company is expanding and they're hiring on 800 more people at this location. It's scanning for information like that. And then what it does is it will actually go in and search on things like LinkedIn or, other platforms where you can actually find people who are going to be relocating to the area to be able to fill that role, as an example. And so you can actually set it up. Apollo is a great tool for this. Clay is another great tool for this. Both of those natively connect inside of Claude. But what it looks like is I can invoke that command and then the skill runs. And ultimately what the search will look like is I will get a spreadsheet where it'll say, hey, here are all the employers that have, announced some type of expansion that they're doing. Here are, all those locations that it's tied to. Here are people that we found on LinkedIn who might be head of HR or people that are going to be responsible for hiring the people that are going to be a part of this expansion. And here is their name. Oftentimes you can get their email because our information is everywhere these days, especially if they have it on their LinkedIn, the link to their LinkedIn account. And then inside of Apollo, you can actually set it up so that way automatically, if I want to start to reach out to that person on a personalized level, it will email and DM those people on LinkedIn. And something to the effect of, hey, I see that you are moving to our area, like I see that you might be the person who's responsible for, this new expansion in our area. Like, that's so awesome. We're excited to, like, see your business thriving and growing. I'm, a local person who helps, businesses with relocating their employees into our area and making it an end-to-end service to, make sure that your new employees are taken care of. Like, would it make sense for us to get together to discuss, bringing your folks into the area? I think that's like I would be leaning into those type of things right now, because it's, that it fits into the realm of life events. Like, everybody is eventually going to face a relocation in some capacity, like I'm experiencing right now. And so it gets into the idea that they're motivated, like, you're not going to have to overcome an interest rate objection or home prices objection. It's, hey, I'm moving to your area because I'm working at this new company that's expanding. And so you don't have to fight that same objections. And I think it just makes you go above and beyond. And it's the opportunity to get multiple people from just that one source.
Interesting. That's an interesting take on it for sure. Because I've heard of all these things of like, well, this is how you should do it for social media, or here are like follow-up plans. But what a concept to actually chase the companies that are growing. And on the flip side of that, is it able to track things like companies that are having mass layoffs? And not that I wish, obviously, that upon anybody.
Sure.
That sometimes those situations result in home sales and people don't know what to do. Wouldn't it be great to be a resource before they go into like a short sale status?
Yeah. I never tackled it from that specific angle, but I will tell you something akin to that is, if you think about the flip side, because you mentioned short sales, here in Ohio, all of our pre-foreclosure data is public record. Yeah. So what it looks like, I have a skill, going back to the skills concept, I have a skill that I can run where it will automatically scan, again, all the news publication and publicly available websites on new pre-foreclosures that are happening. And that could be for, one of the reasons you described, hey, they got laid off, whatever the case might be. They've hit that status, for some reason or another. It actually will not only find those new pre-foreclosure data, it will actually also go ahead and create personalized mailers for each of those specific properties. Now, me personally, I've done, like the gold letters before, and I've learned, like the language around what I should and shouldn't put on these things, especially if you're targeting somebody who's in a pre-foreclosure status. And I will tell you, if you're somebody who hasn't done this yet, I would not be direct and abrupt with them about it, because it is a very sensitive topic that you're navigating.
100%.
So I always put something that's very generic. It's not, hey, I know that you're in this situation, and like, I want to be of help to you. I usually try to leave it as open-ended as, hey, I'm reaching out in the off chance that you might be interested in, for example, receiving a quick cash offer on your home. Or, like, we have folks that are moving into our area and you're just kind of in the radius of some of our clients are looking for. If that would ever be of interest, we'd love to be top of mind for you. So I keep it open-ended like that, because then it makes it more approachable for that person to say, hey, like, I might be interested in that. And then I know on the back end that that's the situation going into it. And then I can ask the proper questions actually once I'm with them and on a more personalized level. But that is something that's possible. And again, all through AI, I'm scraping that data and getting that all sent out.
Well, and I think that's so smart too, that you're not directly attacking like hey, I know you're in a foreclosure situation, because there's so much emotion that can be tied to that, right? Especially depending how fast they get that letter and how fast they're aware of that situation. And many people know it's coming, right? Like, everyone's like, well, they knew they didn't pay their mortgage for a set amount of time. And yet when that letter comes, emotionally, people are dealing with that. And so being able to say, hey, you might be interested in doing something, then allows you to get in front of them and then build that relationship so they trust you to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'll tell you, before I got into real estate, I mentioned that I've been through many different businesses. I've been in a situation where, like, I was getting foreclosed on my home. I've been evicted from apartments in the past. So I sympathize with these people on a very deep level that they're going through this. And that's part of the reason that I actually started getting into it in the first place, is because I had firsthand experience with it. I think that whenever you approach it from being more general, I think it's perceived that you're coming in and you're almost being a blessing for them, versus you're, being taking advantage of the situation, and you're coming across as maybe someone else that just wants another piece of the pie, so to speak. I think when you come in and you're more general about it, what I've perceived is that people, when they reach out to you or they see, the messaging, it's almost like this was perfect timing, like because I'm in this scenario. So I've experienced that versus, trying to be, I've certainly done the direct, because I thought that, hey, if I wanted the problem solved, then I should do that. But I got enough of, I won't curse on the podcast for you, but I've gotten enough mean, nasty phone calls to make it the pivot, accordingly.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know not a lot of people love to be necessarily an open book about, those things. And it just goes to show too, being in that situation and having that understanding as well. And why these things are important to you, and why you're using AI to help build these things out. So I appreciate you being an open book on that.
Yeah, for sure. I honestly, I wear it as a badge of honor now, because I think it's a part of my testimony as far as being a business owner. Like you said, I think a lot of people shy away from it. But I think that in some capacity, it's been 10 years that I've owned a business now. And I think, it's just kind of one of those things that you hear time after time, hey, the first decade that I was trying to run this business, I was basically eating glass every day, and, I was hemorrhaging money, and, you hear all kinds of crazy stories about what people have gone through. So I feel like in some capacity, it's just my testimony. It's what was required for me to be able to, get the knowledge that I needed. Like I said, oftentimes it's not knowing the right things to know. It's knowing what not to do a lot of the time. So I've certainly gotten, I think, my fair share of exposure to things I should not do. And that's, forced me to tighten up, so I'm very open about it, for sure.
Awesome. All right. So last question, a book or podcast that you would recommend to everybody?
Yeah. I couldn't pick just one, so I actually have a couple here for you. So without a doubt, the best one without a doubt is this one right here. This is the Bible. I have multiple of them here. I have the King James Version here. This one's hard to read. This one, I have an ESV Bible. That's the go-to that I have. I think this is the greatest startup book ever. I think God's the greatest startup person. And I think there's a lot of knowledge to be gleaned from that, for sure. Outside of that, this is actually a new one for me, and I'm actually still in the process of reading, but this has just been really transformational as of the past month that I've been reading this one. But this is Good to Great in God's Eyes by Chip Ingram. So it's an intentional play on of Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is the great business book around, how do companies like Amazon, how are they so different than any other company that's, not nearly as gargantuous as Amazon, right? So it's the same concept as that, but it's basically the subtitle is 10 practices great Christians have in common. So, just as an example, and I know I shared with you offline, one of the things is like thinking great thoughts. So like I actually have in here, I'll show you quickly. The bookmarks that I have in here right now are actually note cards that I'm writing down positive, affirming thoughts that I'm trying to, remind myself of each day. And so that's like one of the practices that's detailed in the book. So this has been very, very good as of this particular season of life. And then I would say the last book that I have, this is also a classic of mine, is The Alchemist. I like revisiting this one every couple years. Have you read that one before?
I don't think I have.
Okay. That one's all about embracing the journey of life and the fact that there's always going to be different seasons for different things. So especially like because of QL content, the idea of like a goal versus the mission statement. The beginning of this book, he has a goal And it's very interesting because then by the end, he realized it was all just a mission along the way. So very good book.
Interesting. And I love that, this week, even though they're going to air at different points, I just had the conversation with Brandy from QL, and we were talking about QL and the mindset. And I think that's like, everyone wants the secret book. That's just like, oh, this is how you run the business. Here's the play-by-play, which there are books out there and there's a lot of, practical things you definitely can take. But if you don't have the mindset going forward, it doesn't matter what systems you run.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's, The Alchemist has nothing business related to it at all. It's a story. It's fiction. There's nothing true or applicable in a business scenario about that book at all. But what I really enjoy about it is just the fact that he sets out on this mission. He thinks that it's a goal that he wants to reach a certain destination is basically the concept. It takes him a long, long time to get to that place. But along the way, there's these different chapters of places that he finds himself. And what I really appreciate about it, and kind of like as it's, expanded upon in the book, it was just the idea that each of these seasons were required for him to be able to get to this, end destination. In hindsight, he realizes that basically the personal growth that he had along the way was really what was worthwhile all along. Reaching the destination didn't really matter all that much. So I totally agree. It's just about embracing the journey.
Awesome. That is 100%. I know we could go on and on and on, and yet people's attention spans are 47 minutes. And I learned that from Jason Abram. So thank you, Jason Abram.
Yeah.
But I hope you guys enjoyed this so much, and what great insight to AI and how you can actually practically start using it in your business to actually run a business. So thank you, Trevor, so much for being on today.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Best way to contact me, just email me. Is my first name, Trevor, the number 1 @kw.com.
Awesome.